The movie begins in a dark room where a man named Dalton Russell. Russell claims that he's currently in a jail cell and admits that he just successfully executed the perfect heist. The scene shifts to the Manhattan Trust Bank, where we see a band of robbers dressed in white overalls, raiding the place with gas and taking the people inside hostage. Outside the bank, a security officer sees that a robbery is taking place, so he informs the police. Elsewhere, two detectives, Keith Frazier and Bill Mitchell, are informed about the situation and assigned to negotiate with the robbers. When they arrive at the bank, the police have already secluded the crime scene and they're briefed on the current situation. Meanwhile, inside the bank, the robbers tell all the hostages to put their phones and keys in a bag. But one of the bank workers tries to hide his phone. He lies that he left it at home, but the robber checks his office and finds it. To send a message to the other hostages, the robber beats him up so that nobody else tries any tricks. Afterward, they instruct all the hostages to change their clothes and ask them to wear the same kind of overalls and masks that they have on. When they find an old man who is sick among the hostages, they send him out with a note warning the police to leave. While all this is happening, the chairman of the bank, Arthur Case, calls a woman named Madeline White and asks her to help with the situation. The two meet up and he tells her about a safe in the bank that he needs her to protect at all costs. However, he doesn't tell her what's inside the safe. Back at the crime scene, the police continue their investigations. The detectives try to contact the robbers, but they don't receive any answer. Even worse, the robbers have turned off all the security cameras, so they can't get any information from there either. A while later, the robbers send out another hostage with a briefcase strapped to his body. There's also a note from the robbers, instructing the police to prepare 2 buses and a jet for them before 9 p.m. Failure to comply means that the hostages would suffer the consequences. Later, Arthur visits the detectives and offers to provide the things the robbers requested, but Keith refuses and tells him to leave. After a while, the robbers send out another note, and this time, they request food for the hostages. The police immediately arrange the food and send it in with a bug to listen to the conversations inside the bank. While listening and hoping to hear the robbers' plans, they find out that they're listening to a foreign language. They call on the civilians to identify the language and discover that it's Albanian. The detectives then call a woman to help them translate it, but when she listens to it, she informs them that what they've been listening to is an old recording of a speech from a former Albanian president. Meanwhile, inside the bank, Dalton manages to open the safety deposit box that Arthur wants to protect. He then takes out all of its contents. Outside, Arthur brings the fixer, Madeline, with him and introduces her to Keith. He asks Keith to involve her in the investigation, and he reluctantly agrees. Afterward, Keith calls inside the bank, and this time Russell picks up the phone. Keith warns him that he would soon be arrested and locked up in jail, but Russell just laughs, claiming that he's going to walk out the front door and the police won't be able to do anything about it. The robbers then separate the hostages by keeping them in different rooms and shuffling them from time to time, while mixing them up with some of the robbers. At the same time, they also continue their other plan and continue digging the floor of the supply room in the bank. Later, Madeline requests to speak with Russell on the phone. She offers him a way out of the situation if he can help her with something, so he invites her into the bank. Inside, she offers him $2 million if he protects the contents of the box. Russell rejects the offer and asks her what's inside the box, but Madeline reveals that she doesn't know. He then informs her that he already opened the box and knows what's inside. Russell tells her that the box belongs to a man who worked for a bank in Switzerland during World War II. The person took advantage of the war and made himself so rich that he could establish a bank in New York. Hearing this, Madeline immediately realizes that he's talking about Arthur, so she asks him to take her to the box. He takes her to it and shows her old documents written by Nazis. Russell states that Arthur should have destroyed the documents years ago, but he didn't. Once again, Madeline offers him a chance to walk away from the heist as a free man, but he just rejects it again. When Madeline comes out of the bank, Keith asks about her conversation with the robbers, but she tells him that she's not allowed to discuss that with him. The detectives continue the investigation and discuss the robbers' potential plan. Keith suggests that the robbers are probably just buying time and keeping them distracted so they can execute another of the plans. As a result, he decides to take a gamble so they can be a step ahead. He calls Russell again and lies that they've prepared the buses and the jet. Keith then states his terms and tells Russell that they'll only provide the bus and plane after he confirms that the hostages are safe. Russell then invites Keith into the bank and shows him around so he can see all the hostages himself. Keith promises the hostages that they'll all be out soon and then offers Russell two options. Either he arrests him after the robbery or he surrenders now and ends the robbery. Not surprisingly, Russell rejects his two options. The two then engage in a conversation, and Keith reveals that the police know that the robbers don't need a plane, but were only keeping them occupied. Russell also asks Keith about his personal life, and the detective reveals that he plans to get married, but can't afford it yet. Before he leaves, Keith attacks Russell and tries to take off his mask, but Russell is saved by the other robbers. When Keith goes back outside, he tells Mitchell that he deliberately attacked Russell to know what kind of mindset he has and that he's concluded that they won't hurt anyone. Unfortunately, his conclusion is proven wrong when Russell calls them again and turns on one of the cameras to face them. The robbers then kill one of the hostages, leaving the detectives horrified. Keith rushes back to the bank to confront Russell, and the robber tells him that the hostage's death is his fault. He then threatens to kill the others if their demands aren't met soon. After hearing the news of the hostage that was killed, Keith's boss arrives at the crime scene and scolds him for letting it happen. He takes Keith off the case and continues planning with the police. They eventually decide to raid the bank and shoot everyone with rubber bullets till they can single out the robbers. Meanwhile, Keith presumes that the robbers wouldn't just stay inside the bank, waiting for the police to get fed up and raid them, so he goes back to check the briefcase they sent and finds out that they bugged so they could listen to the police. Realizing that the robbers have always been one step ahead of them, Keith warns the others to abort the raid, but they refuse and go forward with their plans. The robbers find out about the raid and send out all the hostages. Keith asks that they interrogate each of them to find out who the robbers among them are. While that's happening, the other officers enter the bank to check what has been stolen, but they're shocked to find out that all the money is intact. They also discover the fake guns and realize that the hostage execution was also just a ruse to scare them. After interrogating the hostages, they're unable to single out any robbers, so Keith informs his superior about it. Considering that they don't have any evidence and no money was stolen, the boss asks Keith to close the case, which he agrees to. However, he still feels that something isn't right, so he carries out another personal investigation to find out the truth. While studying bank records, he finds some irregularities concerning safe deposit box number 392 and asks Mitchell to help him do some more digging. Afterward, he calls Madeline and confronts her about the robbery, using an implicating recording between her and Arthur. She's finally forced to tell him about Arthur's dealings with the Nazis, but asks him to keep it to himself so he doesn't get in trouble. Later, Madeline visits Arthur and tells him that Keith is still on their case. He asks her about the envelope in the box, so she tells him that Russell has it and might be planning to blackmail him with it in the future, because the robbers only took the contents of the box and left all the money, so she concludes that the contents must be more valuable. Arthur finally admits that the box contained diamonds and the ring of his Jewish friend's wife, who he sold out to the Nazis in exchange for a lot of money. Arthur then asks Madeline to keep it a secret, and she does since they made a deal earlier. The scene switches back to the dark room, and we find out that Russell isn't in a cell. In reality, he's in a secret compartment his team built in the supply room during the robbery. A week after the robbery, Russell comes out of the room with the diamonds, while his teammates who were among the hostages wait for him outside. They spot Keith entering the bank and warn Russell, but he assures them that he'll come out safely. Russell bumps into Keith while leaving, but the detective can't recognize him. Afterward, he joins his friends in the getaway vehicle, and they all celebrate their successful heist. Keith continues his investigation in the bank and goes to check safety deposit box 392. Inside, he finds a diamond ring and a note saying, "Follow the ring." Later, he confronts Arthur about it, but he claims he doesn't know anything, so Keith goes to meet Madeline and persuades her to expose Arthur. When Keith gets home, he finds a diamond inside his pocket, which Russell put there when they bumped into each other. The story ends with Keith smiling when he remembers Russell telling him that he'll walk out the front door and he wouldn't do anything about it. That's all for today's recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.